Cheers! Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are back for Season 3, Episode 8. This one has added up quickly.
Yeah. We're adding in one more week than we originally planned, so we'll get... This is not really a bonus episode, but another musical for the season.
Yeah, it feels like a bonus in my mind because we were not fully expecting it, but I feel like this is something that's like a sneaky surprise in the musical categories, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Any podcast business today?
Nope.
All right, let's hop right into what are we drinking tonight?
Tonight we are drinking the 2019 James Gang Reserve Primitivo from Tobin James. This is Primitivo number 3 or 4, so
I feel like it's a good steak wine.
I was going to say, I didn't know if I pushed that to see if you'd say it again, but...
And it pairs well with steaks. Let's give it a little sniff.
Too bad we didn't plan ahead and have steak for dinner tonight. Then we could have really definitively known. Nothing really jumps out to me on this.
See a little berry on there?
Yes. It's getting to the point where I almost smell the season of show we were on the last time we had Primitivo. I get some film noir vibes from this.
Just like a good juicy steak, maybe. All right, let's taste it.
Very berry.
A lot going on the first taste. Not an alcohol forward. A lot of flavor right off the bat, but I don't really know how to.
It almost tastes like a gusher, like that. Oh yeah, that sweetness.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, did I get one? Did I get a taste?
There also some cinnamon there too.
A little bit. I just smelled a lot of artificial cinnamon candles today, and that's not what I taste.
Your olfactories.
Yeah. But yeah, that gusher, that almost like the chewiness of the gummy. This is obviously not chewy wine, but that texture.
No, I get that right off the bat, and then after I swallow, I get a little bit of Big Red. Not quite that intense, but a Big Red after you've been chewing on it for 10 minutes. That flavor.
We should be considered professional sommeliers at this point.
Well, I'll go ahead and email Tobin James, say, here, we got some tasting notes. You can print on the back of your wine bottles.
Do you guys need help with your labels? We got it.
Taste of gusher and chewed Big Red. Sales go through the roof.
It is good. I like it.
This has just the really generic back on it, so nothing really from the wine description to give us.
When we get our next shipment,
any cheat sheets,
we're gonna pull that piece out, the paper that comes with it, and we will start reading that either before or on the show.
Yeah, I think read it right after we taste ours and see if we still taste that, because I still like our unadulterated raw taste notes of various candies.
100%. You can't be swayed.
Not the traditional wine tasting notes.
I always if the wine drips down the bottle a little bit, I always I wipe it off with my finger and taste it, and I'm always like, oh no, this is gonna ruin what I say on the podcast.
Tarnish it.
And it's one single drop that just tastes pretty much like plain red wine when you're drinking it, or not even drinking it, kind of tasting it from over there. That it never.
We try to be so pure.
This is an authentic podcast here. All right, so I guess now is it time to go behind the screens, where each week we go behind the big screens of Hollywood and explore some aspect of film production or storytelling. Take it away.
So this week we are diving into CinemaScope, which was mentioned last week in Hairspray as kind of an insult, honestly. So with CinemaScope, I'd heard about it before, and I think we maybe mentioned it when we were doing our behind the screens on Cinerama, because this was a technology meant
with Todd A.O.
With the Todd A.O. deep dive, where we mentioned Cinerama. CinemaScope was also something designed to compete with Cinerama, which, as you recall, took multiple cameras to make a really wide image. So a bunch of movie film producing studios were trying to find a way to replicate that same thing without all the overhead. And the reason they were all trying to do this was because film was kind of dying down with the release of television. And so cinemas wanted something that you couldn't get on a TV. So they were exploring this super wide, breathtaking aspect ratio. So the CinemaScope was designed to have a single lens, and its benefit over Cinerama was also that it could be retrofitted to existing theaters by kind of putting a little lens adapter on the existing movie theater screens. Oh. So it was filmed by basically really squeezing it down or stretching it out, I guess, really wide and then when you put the lens on it, kind of getting it back to where it should be. So
Interesting.
it was kind of taking advantage of, a little bit of physics there to kind of warp it and then unwarp it afterwards. So the process is credited by, or Spiros P. Skouras is credited as the inventor of, he's a very Greek guy.
Yeah.
The inventor of it in 1953. However, he was the president or head of 20th Century Fox. So I don't know how much inventing he was doing while he was, running 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, I'll be a little skeptical on that. And, things in the 50s were very
His name was
shady.
on some funding there for sure. But it goes back even further to, I'm probably butchering this, Henri Crichton, maybe? Henry, who knows?
I wouldn't even begin. I would definitely go with the Henri, but the last name, I don't even know.
There's one of those fancy little carrots on top of the E in his last name. So he was an astronomer who an astronomer and an inventor. And in 1926, he invented what he called the anamorphoscope process, which used a tool called hypergonars. I have no idea how you're supposed to actually pronounce that.
Science, math.
Yeah. Which essentially was the process for this cinemascope. And he presented it to a bunch of film studios at the time, but this was in the 20s. So film was still on top of everything. They didn't really need to change anything. They were still printing money essentially. So he basically got no bites on that. However, when Spiros was trying to replicate this Cinerama process in a more simple way, one of his assistants remembered having read about this guy. So they tracked him down and found out that his patent had actually expired by that time.
Shady.
So they went ahead and actually bought up all of his existing inventions, the hypergonars, whatever that he had, and set about actually producing more of them. And they enlisted Bosch and Lomb to actually mass produce these things that could actually get them out to all their studios. And they got to work producing, I guess, technically two movies at the same time, The Robe and How to Marry a Millionaire. So The Robe was the first one that it was started on, but it was such a long movie that it actually finished up production after How to Marry a Millionaire. But they held up the release of How to Marry a Millionaire because The Robe had been kind of marketed as being the first one as having this process. So they were trying to produce a whole lot of movies. And they had a whole bunch, kind of going on in the background, really pushing this forward. So they had an advantage over these other cinemas or other film production companies. And they also licensed the technology later to Disney, who used it to produce Lady and the Tramp, which is kind of an interesting thing about making an animated movie using these film lenses. But I guess they had to kind of do that, and now it's all digital. But
yeah, but I mean, seeing this, it's like, of course, Disney has its hands in everything.
But I think they kind of partnered with Disney on this because Disney had created some stereoscopic sound for Fantasia in the 50s, and they really wanted it. They were doing this whole cinemascope technology thing. They needed to pair it with some really good audio too. So I think it was kind of like a partnership deal there where it's like, you can use our visual part if we can use your audio part. So
and that sounds similar to what it was with Technicolor too, is like, we'll promote, like if we get the rights, we will promote this and like get our stuff out there. We're producing stuff so quickly. It seems like they want to be mutually beneficial with all their relationships.
Yeah. And funny enough, this was actually processed using Eastman color. Well, sorry, they used Eastman color, which I don't know what it is. I want to do another deep dive on that, maybe.
The deep dives keep coming.
It says it was used Eastman color, I guess, to shoot it, but was processed by Technicolor still. So I don't really know what that means, but I do know that Technicolor was still, this wasn't a replacement for that by any means. It was a different part of the filmmaking process entirely. And back to the audio part of it. So originally the visual was going to be an aspect ratio of 2 to 66 to 1. But because they had to make the film strip narrower to add these stereoscopic soundtracks, they're originally going to film it actually silently, and then I used a separate recording film to actually get all the audio. But they were able to get it all on the same strip by moving it down to 255 to 1. So not quite as wide, but still much wider than the general film at the time. And I guess wrapping up my research, it was obviously really breathtaking and really like good visual experience. They were able to roll it out to theaters like nationwide, so it got a lot of good publicity exposure from all that. But it really struggled with certain things. Like, it was great for movies like big war movies where you have these, see these vast armies or vast landscapes on these things. But when they were trying to film things that were close up, it didn't fully de-squeeze it. So it kind of still looked kind of warped for things that were close up. So it was really hard to kind of shoot around those things and made it not very practical to film just everything with it. And so eventually it was succeeded by Panavision, which I also look forward to exploring in another.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a bunch of words out there that I know are associated with films.
Yeah, you see in the opening credits all the time.
And you're like, oh yeah, that's a thing. But I don't know. I have any clue what they mean. So
I started going down, researching that, and I was like, I need to actually draw a line somewhere. I can't just, put all of film history in this in one episode. So I'm excited to look into this Eastman Color and Panavision.
We need to start a list of these behind the screens things as we pick up terms and what we need to expand on, and give us a place to go for when we don't have anything to go for.
It's definitely fascinating learning about all those processes and just how some of these things were invented.
And thinking that this was the 50s or the 20s when all these different things were invented, and just how much technology has progressed from there, that just thinking, how hard it must have been to figure these things out without all of the stuff that we have now. And it's wild. And
it's crazy. This thing invented in 1926 was then really used heavily in 1953, like almost 20 years later. That nowadays, think of technology from 20 years ago and just how dated anything would really seem. That it's kind of crazy how that was still
CGI from 2000. Yikes!
That it's wild how that was still able to be useful later on. And this, guy who remembered some story about some inventor who created this thing, they were able to pull it all together, and it became CinemaScope.
Interesting. Well, after having listened to and watched Hairspray a gajillion times in the last almost 20 years, thank you for solving what CinemaScope is for me.
Yes. So I'm assuming she was making the rude joke saying that she was so wide that she wouldn't be able to be captured on regular film, would have to be captured with CinemaScope.
Yes. Those Von Tassel girls, man. Mean
girls everywhere.
All right. So now ready to jump into Slept on It, speaking of Hairspray?
Yeah.
So does your rating change after sleeping on it? Last week you rated Hairspray a 6.1 and I rated it a 7.
Yeah, I think a 6.1. I was wondering whether or not I'd be singing more of the songs or wanting to listen to more of them, and they were good in the time. I don't think they really grew on me more, so I think I'm good with my 6.1.
Yeah, I feel pretty good with my 7. I will say I was listening to the soundtrack while we were setting all this stuff up down here before we got started, and oh man, it's such a hype soundtrack. I mean, sometimes you need a little energy boost before we jump into these podcasts. That I enjoyed dancing around a little bit.
Dance party.
Yeah.
I think it's a soundtrack that it's a soundtrack that I think I would enjoy if I'd seen the movie multiple times. And
oh wait, you want to watch it again? That's crazy.
Watching it with your friends and kind of all getting to watch it several times over a couple of weeks probably really ingrained that into you. Watching it just one time, it wasn't as catchy as some movies I think that we've seen.
I appreciate that. I know I've said many times, it is really hard for me to get into a movie or a soundtrack the first time. I need to hear it many, many times before I can be like, okay, I kind of see where people are going for, what people are all excited about.
It just makes it more familiar, and which makes you enjoy it more.
Well, I'll continue to play the songs around the house, and hopefully you will start to love it as much as me.
Go for it.
All right. So now it is time for my deep dives, shallow dives, fun facts. One day we'll get a better name for it. But I just looked into some of the fun stuff from behind the scenes, and one of the first things I found was that apparently John Travolta was very kind and welcoming on set, which I feel like is a kind of a big pivot from what we were reading from Grease. Is that he was kind of like a drama or a little bit of a diva, and I want this song and I'll do this. Like, just seemed like he kind of had grown a little bit more as a person, as an actor. And it
was definitely much later in his career, and I think also playing a more motherly character. Maybe he was method acting there.
Apparently, the first time he met Nikki Blonsky, who played Tracy, she was like super nervous, and she said it was the first time that she'd ever been like speechless in her life. And he just looked at her and said, "Come to mama," and like gave her a big hug. And so I think he was excited about this role. And I mean, it's definitely, I think as an actor, you kind of get tired of doing the same things over and again, obviously playing a woman and all the dancing and singing and stuff in a fat suit had to be a challenge and a lot of fun for him. And speaking of the costume for Edna Turnblad, it apparently took John Travolta 4 hours to get into that costume every time. The suit weighed about 30 pounds, and he also had to have 5 gel-filled silicone face prosthetics added to his face. So.
See, I thought the face prosthetics looked the worst out of everything, really, maybe because I just knew it was John Travolta. I thought some of the parts on like his arms and legs didn't seem as fake as I thought they would, just knowing that he was in a fat suit.
Yeah, I feel like again, I've seen this a gajillion times, but every time I'm always kind of like, can you tell where it, like, I feel like I'm always looking for it. But But also I read somewhere else too that apparently once he got in the suit, it was so hot that they just had to like shoot because they would like stick air conditioners under the dress to like help vent him a little bit. But it was just this like really hot and heavy suit that I with all the dancing that they have to do, I can't imagine having to do it in something like that.
I wonder how much actual screen time he really had and how many days of shooting in that suit he had to do.
I'm sure there was so much like rehearsal without the suit, but then I also feel like you kind of got to rehearse in the suit too, because going from just dancing around to then add 30 pounds to yourself, and it's not like he's just kind of swaying in the background. Especially in that last number, he's really dancing. And Welcome to the 60s, he's got some big dance numbers. So
yeah, I wonder if he wanted to get them all out of the way up front, or if he was like, let's go ahead and film one day and then give me a week, and then we're gonna do my next scenes.
Yeah, I think I would need a break if it were me. My next note is, on the note of dance numbers and things, I've read this many times over the years that it is commonly referred to, the last song's called You Can't Stop the Beat, but the cast members call it You Can't Stop to Breathe, because it's so fast paced and the lyrics are so quick that, and every time I've always tried to sing it in the car, I'm like, oh no, I got this. And then by the end, I'm like, okay, I get it. There's a lot of words in this song, but apparently Queen Latifah had no problem with it because she's a rapper, and that kind of fast paced singing is in her repertoire.
A lot of practice.
And then on the note of Queen Latifah, we've got a bunch of connecting things here. Apparently Aretha Franklin wanted to play the role of Motormouth Maybelle, and Queen Latifah beat her for the part. So that could have been Queen Latifah is obviously a legend in her own right too, but Aretha Franklin could have stepped in and played that role too, which would have been, I think, a much different
very, very different
version of Maybelle. I don't really know how to take that, but
I feel like this was the real peak of Queen Latifah's years, where she was in
Chicago in this. She had all of her own movies. Yeah, she was big time. My next note is apparently Amanda Bynes ate about 40 lollipops every day on set, because her character always has one in her mouth. And apparently her dad is a dentist and was very concerned and was like, you can't be eating this many lollipops, you're gonna ruin your teeth. And she's like, oh no, I'm not eating all of them, it's just like pretend. But she apparently actually consumed all of them.
I guess after a couple of them though, wouldn't you get tired of them and just say, give me someone that's like plastic, that's a prop?
I honestly, watching it, I was like, that has to have been plastic. And I just imagine, I can feel like almost sticky, like that fuzzy slippers feeling on your teeth when you've had something like really sweet and sugary, that I just, one or two, sure, but I can't imagine.
You get sticky, like your hands, your mouth would just be annoying after several days. Yeah.
So good on you, Amanda Bynes. And then my last note is that there was several cameos in this. I don't know if I pointed any of them out while we were watching, but John Waters, he wrote, directed, starred, and produced the original Hairspray in 1988. And he plays the flasher who lives next door in the opening song. And then at the end, when they have the judges for the Miss Hairspray contest, Ricky Lake, who was the original Tracy Turnblad, is one of the judges, and Adam Shankman was one of the choreographers for the movie. So he and Ricky Lake were little judges in the audience during Miss Hairspray. So that's cool. I think I knew about the John Waters one before I ever saw it for the first time, but then after I'd seen, I think I recognized Adam Shankman because he was a choreographer on So You Think You Can Dance, which was super popular back in 2007. So I'd seen and heard of him before.
Most choreographers you don't really know by sight.
I will say, watching So You Think You Can Dance for many, many years back in the early 2000 days, I got to know a handful of choreographers that every once in a while I'll see one and be like, I actually know who that is. And that's a pretty obscure thing to know. Did
you practice your dance moves or learn the dance moves from them like the girls did in Hairspray watching the TV?
No, absolutely not. I never did that. That's false. I was big into dancing. I'm not a dancer by any right, but there's all these musicals were so popular and like the shows about dancing and stuff. I just was part of the time.
Dance in front of the TV.
Hey, it was a great exercise. Let me tell you. Whew. So those were my fun facts. It was also really hard for me to find things that were behind the scenes, like fun facts, because I know so much about this movie that I was like, oh, everybody knows this. And I was like, no, nobody actually knows this. You just know too much. So it was a lot of fun. I'm kind of sad to close the door on Hairspray because I just love it so much, but it's okay.
You can always go back and watch it again.
I guarantee you I will. So now it's time to move into tonight's movie. What are we watching?
Tonight we are watching Once from 2007.
Just like last week. We're staying in the same year.
Yep, same exact year. So top 3 movies being Spider-Man 3. Oh, sorry.
First of all, what's it rated?
It is rated R.
I will say that surprised me when I was Googling it. I think so many of these musicals have been like PG-13 that I was very caught off guard by the R rating.
Yeah, I wonder why. I don't remember there being spoiler alert, I have seen it before. Any like cussing or nudity or anything violent in there that I'm really interested to see why it's rated R.
Yes. Spoiler alert. I think I've seen it once. I think I watched it with you one time very early on when we started dating. I don't remember anything crazy. I don't really remember anything about what the movie is. I remember seeing it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So we'll look for that.
Watching for things that I think might have caused that rating.
Yeah. And so now we can go into the time machine.
Back to 2007, which is the same year as last week. So if you want to hear more, you can go watch last week's episode with Hairspray and see that the top 3 movies were Spider-Man 3, Shrek the Third, and Transformers. And the top 3 songs were Irreplaceable by Beyonce, Umbrella by Rihanna featuring Jay-Z, and The Sweet Escape by Gwen Stefani featuring Akon. We've already answered this before, but have you seen it before?
I believe so. I'm like 80% sure that I've seen it before.
I have seen it max 3 times. I feel like I haven't seen it in 10 years or so, but you said we've seen it together, which means it's been less than that. And it's obviously been at least the 7.
I mean, I was going to say it probably was 8-ish years ago, 8.5 years ago.
So it's been a minute. And I do remember the general plot line, but I remember like maybe 5 minutes worth of it. And it's over an hour and a half movie. So I am interested to see like what I don't remember. And I do know that I loved the soundtrack and downloaded it and listened to it all the time. So I'm excited to hear all the songs again.
Yeah, I know I'm definitely familiar with like 1 or 2 of the songs for sure, but I'm not super familiar with this one. So I'm excited because I feel like we've been kind of on a roll for the last couple of weeks of me being relatively familiar with most of the musicals. So I'm excited to jump in and see this one again.
Yeah, and I do have some things that I want to go over after we've seen the movie and fill you in on, because I don't want to tarnish your viewing of it, but I do want to, I've got some fun facts for afterwards.
Oh, I love it. I'm glad that so I feel like I've taken off my like I know everything about this movie or a lot about this movie and given it to you, and
we're trading our 2007 films.
Yes, I love it. All right, so ready to jump in?
Let's watch Once. Cheers.
Once.
Not the once time that we've watched it, but
that like hurts me how terrible that was. I'm really sorry to anybody that had to hear that.
I really feel like we didn't acknowledge the pun when we mentioned that we had seen it before. It was just said, yeah, I've seen it once or twice before the break, but
you are really leaning into those dad jokes.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a lot to be said with once.
All right.
Anyways.
Bring it on.
Well, no. Let's jump into the
wine scale.
Wine scale is a 0 to 10 scale. 10 being the best thing ever. 0 not necessarily meaning the worst wine ever, because the wines that we drink are very good wines. So a low score does not necessarily mean a low score does not mean that it is a bad wine.
I was literally just about to be like, I love listening to you say the exact same thing every week. It's so great.
Always and then different. You act like it's the same thing. I say it's different every time.
It's 88% the same.
Wunged.
You wunged it?
I wung it.
You sound like our kid.
I wing it every time. So all that being said, I rate this one a 4.2.
I give it a 5.5. Again, I was trying with the eyes to like will you to give the same score as me, and
I was
afraid
of giving it like the 6.1 that I gave it, and whatever I gave the last Primitivo. I feel like we were very consistent.
I do feel like we were consistent. I didn't look it up because I didn't want to be swayed by my score.
There just wasn't much going on. Like we noticed the original hit of the Gusher flavor and the big red flavor, and it didn't really evolve or advance. It was fine. Like I said, a bad score or low score does not necessarily mean it's a bad wine. It just didn't really, blow my mind or have anything crazy that developed as I drank it.
I will say on my first sip, I was like, okay, it's going to be like a 4 something. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, it was just good.
Yeah.
And I didn't hate it. Or I didn't dislike it. It just, it evolved into something more where I was like, this felt really pretty steady to me. So 5.5 felt
great
good.
Wine to have on hand.
5.5 felt good.
But it's not something to like write home about, but still overall a good wine.
Yes. Cheers, Tobin James.
We are not here overselling things until we get a sponsor, in which case we will say
everything is a 10.
Best wine. In fact, if you're not drinking it, you are like dying by not drinking it. It's literally killing you to not have this. But until we have a sponsor, everything is going to get a very accurate score.
Yes. But even when we have a sponsor, we'll still be accurate because we are us.
Yes, we have integrity.
We do.
Yes.
We do.
Moving on to the movie rating out of 10.
My score, it fluctuated throughout the whole thing. I would like to hear your musical categories that you rate things on.
Yes. So
because I feel like that will help lock in my score.
Generally have my 4 criteria. One being how, like, first of all, how much did I enjoy it? I'm trying to remember my 4. It's different for musical versus other ones. Whether or not I like the soundtrack, how likely am I to go back and like listen to the soundtrack again? The second one, the third one being how likely am I to rewatch it, and how likely am I to, if it's on, to pick it up and watch it. I don't think once is generally on like most channels, but you kind of get the gist.
It wasn't a big blockbuster hit?
I mean, it kind of was. It won awards, but it wasn't necessarily on mainstream TV channels, I think, all the time. So like the big difference between that and my general movie rating score is the soundtrack versus just overall how rewatchable and quotable it is. So I freaking love the soundtrack. That is a huge puller upper for me for the score.
I love the terminology we're using.
It's scientific.
It's great.
Yeah,
keep going.
We'll do it behind the screens on that terminology someday. It definitely like carries it a whole lot. But I will let you go first for your score.
It's so hard because, like I said, I've been swaying back and forth between like 1.5 worth of score, and I will give it a 6.1.
I am going with a 6.6.
I was close. I think that was the upper limit. I think it was between a 5.1 and a 6.6.
There is an asterisk.
Was my wing.
There is an asterisk. It's technically a 7.1, but I'm docking it half a point for reasons I will get into later.
Okay. I can't wait to hear your reasons. Well, do we need to get into our scores now, or are we going to talk about it more as we go through?
I mean, I just really overall, I love the soundtrack. Like I said, it's a huge boost for it. The movie itself, like, was good, very artsy. Some kind of lacked a bit of cohesion the first like several minutes, but then kind of settled into its storyline later. I would love to rewatch the first half of it much more than I would the second half. It was kind of cool in the second half, but much more loved the movie aspect of the first half. But I just kind of really love the soundtrack. Is a huge boost for me.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I want to watch this again in the next like month or two. Obviously not for Culture Night, but we've definitely seen it before. Watching it,
once, you say we've seen it once or twice.
God, this has to be a long next second half of this podcast. You and I have seen it. God, I wish I didn't give that one to you. I wish I didn't laugh. I have to bring it in. We have definitely seen it together. I don't think I saw it before you. It is very familiar. I didn't know it that well that I would like to watch it again to appreciate a little bit more of the nuance of the story. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to, and I didn't think I was going to dislike it, but it just, this was another one where it just kind of left me with that little like hug, warm, cozy feeling. It doesn't have that like perfect cookie cutter ending that you want, but it's still just like.
But I think the whole like non cookie cutter ending totally fits the artsy vibe of this, where it's not exactly like you expect from a regular like love story.
It's the artsy aspect of this that really pulled it up for me. Of how much, this is one of my notes, how much a hard pivot this is from the Hairsprays and the Chicago and the Rent that are like great, but like very Hollywood, very overproduced and beautiful and amazing. But this was just so raw and like artsy, and and it felt so real. Like Zac Efron is not everyday run of the mill, run on the side of the street playing his guitar kind of guy. Like this just felt so like
it felt a lot more
authentic,
European than American, sure. Like Hollywood style.
It did have a little bit of that Love Actually vibe to it too,
right? And like Skins, like the really like UK where the dialogue just feels so much more real
It's not polished. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
It's not exactly what you what you want the person to say.
Yeah.
It is just what this actual person would say.
It's like polished, rehearsed, or scripted. Like it feels very much more natural and real.
I felt like watching this, it was just like buzzwords popping into my head. Raw, authentic, polished, like unpolished compared to
And like
the
they're not
polished things we've
actors,
seen.
the main characters at least, that it seemed like it really played into their strengths by not making it seem too polished. It didn't seem as forced. Felt a lot more like it was just people talking.
And the fact that they don't have names. The main characters are guy and girl is what they're credited as. And there's just something that is just so like pure about it. And I mean, that's just really what pushes it up into the 6 for me. Because I think like as a musical, in what you think of as a musical, it's like a 5 for me, maybe. But I think this story and how it was shown, or captured visually, and how it was told, and the characters, and just so much of it was just so like beautifully done.
I just always just love movies and shows where you have a relatively main character, at least, or a main character that does not have a name, because so often you think you're watching a movie, of course you're going to know the main character's name, and then afterwards you go to like tell someone about the movie, and you're like, yeah, and then what's their name?
Like me every week on the podcast where I'm like, oh God, what's that main person's name? Because I'm like not paying attention closely enough. And then almost all the way through this movie, I was like, oh my God, I don't know their names. And then the credits were rolling and it was literally guy and girl. And I felt so much better because they didn't actually have
I did
names.
think like halfway through, they never said the actual names here, but I was thinking more like the waitress in It's Always Sunny.
Yes.
Or in Fight Club where the main character like never gets an actual name. Everyone else does. That I just love that. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, like it just seems really cool when you just...
It's about the story. It's not about...
Yeah, it's more about the character versus the name.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just something cool and endearing to me about that.
I love it. Let's get into our questions. I think we have a lot to talk about.
But quick side note, can we talk about this is Black Box Deep
and Dark
Cab Sav. It does taste different.
It is. I know. I took a sip. Did you see my face? I just took a sip and I was like, ooh.
I was trying to decide if I like it better.
I don't.
It has more character to it, I think, but it's sweeter.
It is. I think it's the sweetness that got me.
But it's just deep and dark, and I expected it to be
right. I saw it and was like, we've been drinking the same Cab Sav. Maybe we should try this. And I don't think I like it.
The 2021
Deep and Dark Cab Sav
by Black Box
from California. You know, just the little old state of California.
Yeah. If I had to rate the regular Black Box as it's not the same wine scale.
I was going to say on our wine scale, it's a 0.
As a 5, I would rate this one a 2.2. There's just a character that I don't want to it and sweetness that I don't want to it.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't call it deep and dark.
It has like a chocolate taste to it though.
I would call it different and sweet.
Sorry, Black Box. We do love you. We do drink a lot of Black Box.
Honestly, if I saw like a wine that just like labeled like the description as like different, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna try it.
But I'm pretty sure. I mean, the box was open, right, when you poured it? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I had a glass of this the other night. It was fine when I drank it the other night. I swear, drinking these like really good winery wines and then having this Black Box, it is a different experience because I totally drank this the other day and I didn't notice it at all. Mm-hmm. But going from something that is like very, very crafted to this, it's like, oh.
Yeah, we needed like a shot of like a Moscato before that to make this seem a lot less sweet.
That sounds horrible. Let's move into our questions.
Yeah. So the movie description.
God, I forgot.
Pair of star-crossed lovers. It's like a guy and a girl, both musically inclined, meet working on the streets. Not that kind of work on the streets in Ireland, and bond over their love of music and their musical talents. They have kind of a not mixed signals, but like bad timing almost like relationship of love, and end up parting ways at the end to go back to their original
paths.
Lovers. The original lives, and just kind of met up for that fleeting moment.
Well done. According to the TV, a vacuum repairman moonlights as a street musician and hopes for his big break. One day, a Czech immigrant who earns a living selling flowers approaches him with the news that she is also an aspiring singer-songwriter. The pair decide to collaborate, and the songs they compose reflect the story of their blossoming love.
I give that rating an F+.
I wouldn't say F+. Probably like, I would say D+.
That's someone who just like fast forwarded through it. They watched the first 3 minutes, then watched the last 3 minutes, fast forwarded through the rest of it, and decided to write a quick description. No, I like my description better.
I definitely like yours better.
No pun intended.
I think real for this week is me just like rolling my eyes at you.
Once.
Every time you make a once joke, it's just going to be them cut together.
Was the movie what you expected?
Yes. My first note, I'm going to have no notes to it. But I mean, it's him. The movie starts and it's Guy on the street playing his guitar. Like it's a very European looking street. And I was like, this is what I remember. It's like that, like very, I mean, the streets in Europe are so different than the streets in America that you just automatically know that it's somewhere in Europe. And just like the raw musician talent and the guitar is like what I know of this movie.
I definitely know that it like romanticizes the like street performer lifestyle and all that. But it definitely, there's something like really endearing to that small, like little Irish town and
But it's almost like Ted Lasso too, like that small like side street that Ted lives on, and there's just something that feels so like cozy about that. And even like, I mean, like you said, the vacuum shop would give me some serious anxiety because it's very claustrophobic. Small, but
the suit shop too.
But just like everything there is like this like cozy, tight fitting.
Cozy is a way to put it. So it seemed claustrophobic in the shops. The houses seemed a bit more, I mean, not her house, but some of the places seemed a bit more cozy than others. And it did seem to, like I said, romanticize it the same way that I think a lot of movies about like New York City also tend to romanticize a lot of things of like rent, of like living in, you know, not being
New
able
York
to
City is not my place. No, thank you.
Yeah. Was this still under what we expected? Yes, it was what I expected, having seen it before. I'd kind of forgotten the second half of it, and it did kind of like drag on a bit towards the second half of what they were getting at, and just kind of playing more of their songs and recording a album, which I did remember later. But overall, yeah, what I expected. I didn't see anything that would warrant an R rating, though.
I totally forgot that it was that was something we were supposed to watch for. Oh no!
I had kind of forgotten to watch through that. There was absolutely nothing.
I mean,
I don't know why this couldn't have been a PG-13
maybe
or PG. Even.
Honestly, PG.
Yeah.
Maybe like language a little bit.
There was
sings
beer.
that song that she fucked it up.
There was like 3 cuss words.
Yeah.
There was some beer.
Definitely not
smoking,
R. We'll have to. Hookah. I'm gonna deep dive for next week. Is why someone felt this needed to be rated R. Definitely PG-13,
no
if
nudity,
not PG.
Not really even a kissing, but that's like a kiss on the cheek.
Yeah. No sexual.
Yeah.
Anything. I mean, he did like ask her to stay, but that could be, if you're not looking for it AKA as a child, you wouldn't pick up on that.
Yeah. Easily PG-13. You could make even a case almost for PG in a lot of ways. I don't really see.
There was more.
You cut the F word out and you could go PG.
There was more sexual innuendo in Hairspray that was PG last week than this.
Yeah. I do not get that. But anyways, how well did it age? I thought it aged just fine. If you think of it more as a period piece of.
I was going to say that, but this to me felt though the least like a period piece. Like it's telling the story and it happens to be in 2007. And like, yes, there's no like iPhones and texting and things, but it's not like, oh, this murder that happened by this woman in 1920 or, you know, the racial tensions of 1960 or, you know, the like, you know, hair and dancing, singing poodle skirts of the 1950s. This was just like,
but it wasn't really trying to go for like crazy technology things that didn't age really well or any crazy special effects that would look bad later. I think the thing that didn't age really well is the fact that it felt like it was shot on like a iPhone almost, even though it was filmed before iPhones, that it felt like an indie film, but some of the scenes where you could tell like, okay, you've got no dynamic range in the lighting there, but it kind of almost felt like it needed to be. You need to feel like it wasn't filmed on a super high end rig. It
was shot exactly how it 100%. This story needed to be told.
Anything
it was
more than that,
just so well done.
Yeah, anything more than that, like if it was filmed like today, there'd be a lot more of that dynamic range and like more focus on like the lighting and taking more people out of the scene. This felt like it felt more raw because it seemed like it was just filmed on whatever was around.
And raw was the word that kept coming back to me, as this is just like the authentic story that they are trying to tell. And it is wonderful.
But the how well did it age? I think I'll get into my reason for taking off half a point is because he is 18 years older than her.
That I had a hard time. I mean, and I know everybody is going to be with who they want to be, blah, 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 like all things. I had a hard time buying into it.
And that's fine. I mean, you don't really see that as much on this. The age difference doesn't look as apparent when you look at them. But he met her when she was 13. Yeah.
Were you Wikipediaing like I was Wikipediaing?
No, I'd run into this before. And it really kind of like tarnishes how I think about this because it's almost like he groomed her. And they dated for like 3 years, like a year before this until like a year after this. And then broke. I think they still technically like perform together sometimes. But it just felt real creepy knowing that like he is 18 years older than her, which is fine at some ages. When you're really young, that is a huge difference.
Yeah. 13 plus 18 is 31.
So she is like 2 years older than we are.
No, but just that math. 13 plus 18 is 31.
Yeah.
So like more or less if we met someone at 13 right now and then like eventually dated them in a couple of years.
Yeah. It's really weird. She is
older than
2
us.
years older than we are right now, but also she is still like 2 years younger than he was when he filmed it. Like today, she is still like younger than he was when he filmed this. And it's been out for a long time, almost 18 years. That's just like really creepy and weird.
Yeah, that's tough. It's also, I think, hard because we are only 7 months apart in age. That is weird for us because for us, we are very close in age. But 18 years is a long time. There's a big generation gap there. And I think that would just, obviously they are not still together now, but so I'm sure some of this tied into this, that just like, that's such a generation gap that would just create a lot of problems. It'd be very difficult
it's more
to
than just a generation gap
with.
when she was like 13 when he met her, and just something about that just seems way off and wrong to me. And I don't know, like maybe it's not as bad as we seem, and like as it seems that he like, you know, she was 18 when they started dating. It's just still seems like
she would have been
18 maybe when you like admitted that you were dating, but she was still
19.
Like, she was 19, I think, when the movie was filmed, or when
they started dating in 2006. So she would have been 19. 18.
I think they say partners from 06 to 09, but that's when she turned 18, and that's probably when they were like, yes, we're dating, and we're admitting to it. The fact that he is this old and I'm now 18 and legal.
I will say I was a little alarmed when I Googled him and he was 53 currently, and I was like, ugh. And then my brain started doing the math and see how, and it, you know.
So that's why I had to dock it half point, because I just could not unsee that when I was watching this whole thing, and I just loved the music, the movie, everything about it. But knowing that just was really hard to stomach. Now knowing that, and I did not know that at the time. I don't think it was as like, you know, publicized at the time. But it's just that part did not age well at all for me.
Yeah, it's a little it's iffy.
But it just with the whole age in there, yeah. Could this movie be made today? I think it could be, and I think it could be made pretty well.
Yes. I do think that as far as like a film aspect, it would probably be a little bit more overproduced. I think it's kind of harder to find these kind of raw, we keep using that word. I think we're going to keep using that word. That kind of just like, we're here for the story, not for the production aspect.
Yeah, I think actually I almost want to change my answer that no, it couldn't be made today, just because I think movies, if it was made today, it would have been like recorded in the studio versus a lot of these seem like they were recorded like with boom mics on set.
On the street.
And I just don't think it would feel as raw. It would feel much more overproduced because you could get like cinema cameras for much more reasonably priced than you could then.
It would have to be like a true like indie Sundance, whatever. Those kind of like film festivals.
Shot on iPhone type thing.
Yes. Type movies.
Next question. Did they say the title of the movie in the movie?
I mean, they like might have offhandedly said it and they not referring to the title of the movie.
So it's in the song they play, I think, during the credits.
Yes. That was the only time I noticed it.
That's really the only time I noticed it. I don't think they really did. It's been a while since we, I think, really definitively did not hear it in the movie.
I mean, it's also hard with like the musicals, Hairspray. Like they're selling Hairspray in the movie and they talk about it. Rent. There's a whole song about Rent. Chicago. they're like
Well,
living physically in Chicago, and they talk about it.
That's Chicago. Well, I think this one, they had the song, but it was in the credits. But what also is really hard is their thick accents, their Irish accents or Czech or whatever. Like,
praise be to the closed caption.
Yeah, the subtitles definitely made it possible to understand. I've watched this several times. This is the first time I watched it with subtitles, and I feel like I watched a new movie. Knowing what was actually being said or supposedly was meant to be said, way different and much more easily processed, at least. Were there any actors that wanted to do bigger things? Not at all, really.
Nope.
I mean, they're still performing today, but I don't think you could say they went on to bigger things. I think this was probably the peak of a lot of their career, and there were no other actors that like made cameos or anything. It was very small.
Pretty small cast and crew.
What impact do you think the movie had on pop culture?
I don't really think it had a big one. I mean, it's not like this was a crazy phenomenon. I know some of the songs before I knew the movie, so like there was a little bit of that, but
it was definitely like a big movie at the time. And this was like a big era, I think, for musicals. As we saw, there was another one big one we watched in this year. I do remember it winning at like the Academy Awards or something for like best musical. And I still have this memory of watching it and being so excited that they won. And they walk up, and Glenn and Marquetta walk up, and Glenn just takes the trophy and goes, "Tanks," and walks off. And I'm like, oh, that's very memorable. Like, he didn't give like a big speech or anything like that. And I think like they felt bad. And I want to say they invited her back up to like give like a small blurb like a minute or two later, because
deep dive for next week.
She basically just like got no chance to like say anything. I don't know if she meant to, but I remember him like just basically going, "Thanks," and then walking off and being like, that's how they should do a lot of these awards. Instead of like this big over the top process of like, let me thank 5 million people that have been tangentially related in my entire life that like, you know, no one really cares about, but it matters to them type thing, was just really interesting.
I definitely want to look into that. That's super interesting.
So it definitely won some awards and like was a big movie, but I don't think it really fully impacted pop culture as much as other musicals movies that we've watched.
Especially, I feel like, you know, like the Chicago and The Music Man and Hairspray were like, these are a bunch of big name actors, and we are getting them to recreate this movie or this musical that's been around for a long time, and we're gonna like bring it back into hype. And this was just like some people that wanted to sing some songs and make a movie.
Maybe that was only made once. Do you feel cultured after watching it?
No.
Yeah, I think for the same reasons that we just kind of mentioned.
I'll say a little bit, because I do feel like it's very 2007. Just so much of like, could this be made today? We kind of talked about probably not. Like a lot of the fashion and the technology and how it looked is it feels very much to that very mid to early 2000s time period. As far as like general pop culture, movie pop culture, not as much, but I'll give it a little bit. But
and I think honestly, you sway me. I think yes, because when you think of movies like the 80s movies and like Say Anything and those kind of things, where like you think of movies that people watched in like the Brat Pack in like the 80s, you think of like people in like the early 2000s watching like American Pie and a bunch of like the early 2000s type movies. This obviously kind of being one of them. I think this was a certain era of like, if you were in like high school and you were watching movies, like everyone kind of saw this and was like loved this movie, and it was a big thing at that time. That if you want to go back and you want to experience like that time period, like you said, 2007, a very narrow time period, you kind of had to see this to feel like you can relate to that time period.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to watch something like this with our kids when they're older, being born in the 2020s, and watching this and being like, why didn't they just text each other? Or like so much of that stuff that we are so used to now in the 2020s that were not around in 2007. I mean, I kept thinking like, do they not exchange phone numbers? And then at the end, her mom's like, we don't have a phone. And I'm like, you don't even have a phone? What is this?
And she's like, yeah, I'll come by later. And there's no like texting or anything like that. There's bring your vacuum over like later, and like there's nothing of that of like, oh yeah, let me go ahead and like drop a pin. It's all just, oh yeah,
I'll just find you on the street.
Yeah. Some time period, an 8-hour time period, just find me at some time.
Yeah.
Very
so
different.
Again, we need to go back and watch this with our kids when they're older. Just from a, like, how do you perceive this being a kid in the 2020s watching this?
back. Will they feel the same way that we did watching some of our film noir movies of like, oh my God, she just went all the way to San Francisco and like didn't call her sibling before she went all the way there?
Culture Night 2.0, we're going to do a reimagined version of this when our children are older. And we're going to go watch, well, maybe we'll start from the beginning. We'll watch all the movies again with our kids and get their perspective. Because I feel like that would be very interesting. Which is weird because one of them literally can't even talk yet.
And we'll be like huge like podcast celebrities. So it'll be like, do they go on to do bigger things? And we'll be like, yeah, we went on to do bigger things. I don't know about these actors, but like we're big time.
I really love your optimism. You're so great.
I mean, we've gone viral. We've got like 300 followers, so pretty big.
On Instagram.
Yeah.
All right. I will go first with my notes because you went first last week. Okay. So my first note was, it was exactly what I remembered. The European street vibe, the raw music, guitar. That was my memory of this. The actual story, no clue. But the vibe of this show from the first scene, I was like, yes, this is what I remember.
And like to that point, and to like the whole like almost like romanticizing like those like small like villages and it being seeing perfect and amazing compared to our normal life. And like we kind of talked about how I'm sure like American life of like living in New York City is also romanticized. I did have a note about how like immigrant culture also seemed like it was almost romanticized here, where it's like, oh, we live in this apartment, and like she talks to all the people like just hanging out outside of her apartment, and then a bunch of the neighbors just like walk in and come and like sit in front of our TV, and it's like, oh, it's so cool, like, and they've got like friends that do that. And I just imagine like the same thing taking place in America, and everyone being like, yeah, it's real sketchy and real dark, and like I'm sure it probably also is sketchy and dark in the same situation in Europe as well, not being romanticized as a movie.
I agree. Definitely. I really love that you've brought the word romanticized into this, because a lot of this story, when you take a deep breath and take a step back, it's like, okay, this is definitely a one-off case, a once in a lifetime story. Not everybody that's singing on the street is going to experience this.
It's like, funny enough, the romance was the one thing that was not romanticized.
Yes. That was the most realistic thing. And I loved that.
There you go. This guy just like comes on to you randomly and you're like, yep, nope, okay, never mind. Got weird.
Yeah. You know me. I'm a hard out on any random stranger talking to me. But I think so much of Hollywood and the movies and books and all the media we consume is like, oh my gosh, I don't like him. I don't like her. Like this thing. And then we fall in love at the end and it's all perfect. The end. I read / listen to a lot of romance books and it's all just like wrapped up in a little perfect package at the end. And yeah, that's what I want, because I'm just listening to it for like background noise. But I like that this was more realistic I felt like I was set up for failure as a child from just reading these like books where everything ends up happy, that to like have something that's like, oh man, things don't always work out.
Or just things of like guy meets girl, guy's overly forward, they like bang, and like it works out and it's not like super cringy or creepy. This, it was like he kind of like made a move and it was like, nope, not at all. And it was really awkward, like it would be hopefully in real life.
Yes. Very well played out. Very well done. My next note is girl could have been played by Anna Kendrick.
In a remake?
But you say remake?
An American version? Yes.
Yes. American version of this is Anna Kendrick. But Anna Kendrick is 3 years older than her. So not remake.
Like honestly, like looking at the her from on the right hand side there from like the cover, see it
within the first 5 minutes of her being on screen. I was like, that's Anna Kendrick, and I couldn't unsee it, and it was honestly a little unsettling and kind of ruined it a little bit, because that was all I could think about the whole time. But also with just like how, like, not even in looks,
Anna Kendrick, I should say.
And Anna Kendrick is also a good singer, but I think she's also kind of like a little bit bold, but a little bit awkward kind of character too, that I just felt so much similarities between the two of them that I couldn't unsee it once I...
Yeah, she was definitely very bold.
Yes. Sure. And I loved that, because I'm not that, but I think I loved that she kind of modeled I can say what I think and be okay with that, and not being worried about like what you're going to think of me, or if you're going to judge me, or if I'm being too forward. It's like, no, I don't want to do this, or this is just how it is. And I loved that. Yep. Loved that. Okay. Falling Slowly. First of all, beautiful song. Love the harmonies. Just love that song. Beautifully done. But the scene where he's like, okay, it starts like this, and then it goes like this. You got it. Okay. And then they just without rehearsing ever.
Like
play through the whole song.
Is that something people can do? Like if you're just like really musically talented, is that something you just do?
That's what I sat there wondering the whole time, is like, I am not one of those people that could just, I've never heard you sing the song. And you have some words written here and you're just kind of playing music and you've kind of played some little notes for me and I can just harmonize with you. First shot, one kill. What?
Like
what? My brain does not work like that.
Right off the bat. Like I play piano, I play guitar, I play trumpet. I can't do that for any of the instruments. I know you play piano too. I can't imagine like sitting down. I could maybe work it out for piano if I like thought a while, and I would probably be maybe off key, if anything, for it. That to me, it's like, I don't know if that's realistic or not, because I just feel like I can't imagine doing that, but it doesn't mean people can't do that.
So I will say, I was listening to Office Ladies. I've mentioned it before. I'm obsessed with it. And they were doing an interview with Billie Eilish, and she is like a big Office fan. And she was saying something about her like music process or something. And either Angela or Jenna was like, oh, do you just like think in songs? And she was like, you guys don't think in like musical, like, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like, oh man, like in my brain clicked and was like, people just think, there are certain people that think differently. And I think very, very musically inclined people can just do those things.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the same way that like you were able to like imagine our house as we were building it and those kind of things. It's like some people just can do that. Some people just can't do that. And it's part of it, I think, maybe is some people can learn that, and some people just can't learn that too, which makes it even more frustrating, where it's like some people are just naturally born with it. Some people can get to that point, and everyone else is just kind of like, nope, just never going to click.
Good on you, but not for me. Yeah. So I believe that people can do that. It's just so hard for me to buy into as someone that like, I can carry a tune. Am I an amazing singer? No. But like, I can harmonize sometimes. But I could not just sit down and just do that. Yeah, absolutely not. But it's amazing. Like, and I am just in awe. And if I could have anything in life, it would be to be just this incredible singer, piano player that could just do. Yeah,
step into a jam session and just like match what they're doing and kind of
My next note, speaking of Office Ladies, is The Office. I felt like this had some maybe more British Office vibes, but what the American Office was going for, even just in the like the first season, where they casted people who were not big names. They were just everyday people, and these were everyday people. Even like the backup band was just everyday people. There was no one who was like this beautiful, perfect person. Like, and I think that's what makes the British Office and the American Office and this like something that's so beloved, because it's not just these like, especially like Hairspray with Amanda Bynes, who was such a big name at the time, and Zac Efron and Queen Latifah and John Travolta, like these big named, like wonderful people. Whereas this was just like, this is someone that I can imagine being like, I can put myself in the story and be like, okay, I can see it.
Sometimes they do like indie films, but they still put like big names in them. And like, you're kind of watching and you're like, okay, I'm watching like John Travolta in this indie film, or like, you know, the name. And sometimes you can kind of forget about that. But with this one, it's so nice when there's just, it's not any, you know, big actor on any role in this.
And even just how it was shot too, from a film perspective of, it wasn't super high quality. It was kind of where like looking for the shot, not pre-planned of, you know, get to this mark and be here and move your body like this. It felt very, we've said it before, raw, and just like we're capturing what's going on.
And you felt more like you were actually there, as opposed to you're on a set somewhere, or you're on like some, you know, over-engineered like soundstage to think.
They did choreography for 5 weeks before the filming even started. And I
at that party, like you felt like you were at that party watching that.
And I love that. And I think that, you know, that The Office is what I use for comparison, but that is what bumped my score up into the 6s, was that just like natural element to the whole story, from the storytelling to the casting to all of that. Obviously Glenn and Marquetta wrote it together, but I don't know, it felt so much more believable.
Yeah, for sure.
And my next one, I think I've kind of already said this, is just how much of a hard pivot this was from last week, and just all the ones we've seen where it's been very produced, from the outfits, and I mean, especially like Hairspray, like the hair, everybody had a wig on and they had these very beautiful, colorful dresses, and the sets were way overdone and everything was choreographed, and which is amazing and super fun and like lively. But this was just people on the street just telling their story.
Well, this felt a lot closer in a way to Singing in the Rain, which feels like it was like a year ago. That was this season.
What?
Where it felt more
Yeah.
like there was a soundtrack and there was a story that was made to match it. I don't know if that's necessarily the truth. I don't know if this was like a overall story and they wrote songs to it, but it just kind of felt like it was like hopping from song to song, and it felt very jarring at first. It kind of more settled into a bit more of like excuses for having this song later, but it felt very much like here's this song. We're gonna have a little bit of storyline, and then we're to this song, a little bit of storyline, and it felt more trying to fit a story to that versus having a story and having a bunch of like music that kind of push the story forward, or
songs to tell
told
the story.
Yeah.
I agree. It was definitely, the music was stuff that like he had written. I say that in air quotes. Like this guy wrote these songs, and they just kind of plucked them in as they were telling the story.
Well, I had a note that this reminded me in a way of Bohemian Rhapsody, where it was almost like a little bit of exposition to set up like how a song came together or why they made a song. So a lot of times it would seem like they were like, let me write this song, or how do you come up with the lyrics to this, or we can work together on it. And it felt similar to how the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, where it was Queen, but they were telling the background almost to some of the stories. I don't know how like accurate those were, but
Someday we'll watch that for Culture Night Pod, because I love that movie.
100%. Absolutely love that. But it just kind of felt like it was more some exposition as an excuse to have a story versus it pushing the story together.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to think of that like list of types of musicals that you had from the beginning, and this is definitely different
Like
from
jukebox one. Maybe is what this one was. Maybe where it seemed like it was a bunch of songs.
I
and
could
just
not
a
even
story
tell you.
wrapped around it. Yeah, we didn't do as good job with the How Noir Yar branding
I know
for this season.
Sorry, it was hard to keep up with.
Faithful
Right.
listeners.
Okay, and then my last note is every time that guy was sharing his music with, like when they were just like sitting in his bedroom and she was listening, or when he was sitting in the kitchen with his dad and just like playing his music, I don't think I could ever do that. It feels like super awkward to like have, like he meets this girl on the street and he's like, come into my home and listen to like, it feels like just such this like raw expression of yourself, like almost being like, here, read my diary. Just go for it. You just have at it. Here, listen to this song. It just feels like such a vulnerable thing to do. And it like almost felt cringy for me, because I just can't, I'm not one of those people that's like, listen to me perform. That was something that was just hard for me to imagine.
Yeah, that and like everything that I ever like make or create, I want to feel much more polished before I share with literally anyone.
And even like everything I've ever made, or like I've painted most of the rooms in our house, and I'm always like, oh, missed a spot there, or like, oops, did that there. Like everything I've ever made, it's like, I love it and I'm still proud of it, but I'm always like, I kind of see the imperfections there, that I just feel like something like music would be, I'd feel so, I mean, I said vulnerable, like that
Just
raw
have the confidence
feeling
to be like, I want to share this with you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to trust
confidence.
that. I'm going to trust that you're not going to completely like, cut it down.
Yeah. I just stress me out to watch those scenes of being like, I just can't imagine doing that. And I didn't actually write this down, but my last note is just how I loved watching the whole recording scene and just thinking about that whole process. Cause again, I love music. I am not super musically inclined, but just that idea of that whole behind the scenes process and being there till 4 a.m. and just like kind of getting that punch drunk, but then like getting this really great take that's just so awesome, and just all of that. I felt like that was probably a very good way of showing what that's really like.
Yeah. And it feels similar to the more modern version of like people like, writing code, or like movies that I've seen where people like, stay up all night, like watching like Social Network, writing the Facebook, like overnight, staying up, like drinking beers and pounding out code. It felt very much similar to that for like my lifestyle, that I was like, yeah, I just love those days where you're just like, you get in the groove and you're just like crushing through it, and you don't care if it's like the middle of the night or anything like that. You were just, you're in that creative flow, and it just, you keep going.
I was going to say, I feel like that's almost like a part of the creative process. I mean, how many, like all of our trip videos that I stayed up until midnight plus editing. And I mean, the times younger, like painting things that just like went late into the night. I think something that like when you're in that zone and you're going, you keep going and you don't stop.
And I think that's why it's like you rent that out for the weekend, because it's not like something you can just have like on a 9 to 5. Like when creativity hits and things feel right, like they just feel right, and trying to be like, oh yeah, you're only going to be creative from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It just doesn't
That's awesome.
fit.
That works.
You're
And I feel like that's something that's so beautiful.
From 5 p.m. till 9 a.m.
Very true. All right, so that's my notes.
Cool. I will jump into mine. First one is that, like, right off the bat, just understand the great dialogue in this. Just the back and forths, even from the very beginning chase of running down the guy, trying to steal his money, and like just the back and forth they had from them. It was great dialogue, but just so hard to understand that I'm glad we had the subtitles there.
Thank God.
We talked about it being a soundtrack movie or jukebox, whatever, already. So you said you got Anna Kendrick vibes. I got Luna Lovegood vibes from Marquetta right off the bat. Just the way that she like kind of cut through and said things, but still kind of seemed like slightly aloof.
I see it.
And slightly like, not necessarily like unaware, but just, you know, skirting like general norms of how to talk and how to do things.
Yes. I think it's a good hybrid of both.
Yeah. If Anna Kendrick and Luna Lovegood like melded together, that's
just
what you get.
Melted into one.
Yeah. I think we already talked about wishing that we were able to just like pick up a song like that, working with someone and being like, oh yeah, you play this. Okay. Let me get the whole harmony. And I'm sure there are people that can do that, but.
And even like the street band that was like, you want to play with me next weekend, and they're able to just record this whole album worth of songs. Okay.
Yeah.
What?
Even over the course of like a couple of days, it seems like a lot to kind of pick up and get on the vibe with someone like that. But I guess if you're a street performer, you're used to kind of just winging it. But so crazy. His guitar had like a huge hole in it.
It bothered me the whole time.
Like, does that not affect the sound? Just having this huge
That's
hole
what I thought
next
too.
to the main hole of the guitar?
I've never played guitar in my life. I don't really know how that would affect it because I have not personally played it. But it just seemed like a problem to me.
Yeah. And like with that hole keep growing, wouldn't you like want to take a lot more care of it? He's like running down the street after playing it and like hands it to someone while he chases like the guy stealing his money.
That made me so nervous.
Yeah. I'm like, is he gonna get it back? Is he gonna lose his guitar?
And then he keeps talking to this guy in the park, and it seems like he knows him. And I'm like, okay, that's weird, first of all. And then he's just like left his guitar with this person, and you're just like still chatting with this guy in the park. I'd be like, if this is part of my livelihood is my guitar, I wouldn't just leave it with a rando. I would be hurrying back to get it.
Yeah. Crazy. Like, just, I still feel like it would have affected the sound, or like the splinters would have grown. You like give that patch.
Thank you for making a note of that, because I definitely was worried about it the entire movie.
What I was more worried about was his mouth is so small.
You pointed that out early on, and then the more I watched it, I was like, how does any sound come out of there?
Yeah. He was singing like so strongly too, especially in the beginning with so much emotion. And I'm like, his mouth is like the size of like it's 1 inch round.
How can that much volume?
Like max, it's 1 inch round. And he's like, as he's moving his mouth, it's less than that. It's crazy.
Yeah. I don't understand how that's, and I mean, like you said, he's like yelling in some of the songs, which like fit the songs so well. But I'm like, I don't understand. I don't know how is that.
I think there's some people where it's like their mouth just looks really small because they have a beard, but like his mouth just seems small. And I guess he had some scruff, but it seemed like a really small mouth. So I noticed like partway through, maybe like a third of the way through, that he talks through his music. He's telling his feelings like through his songs of like how he's feeling, what he's going through, and he can't talk outside of that. Like when he's on the bus, he has to be playing that song like the Hoover Fixer Sucker guy, and like when he's like saying like all those things, it has to be through music. And she does not. She cuts straight through when she's talking. She's very direct, but she won't talk about anything about her like husband or her life. She completely shuts that down, except through song as well. Like,
but even once the song got to too emotional.
Sorry, once in the song.
When that song got too emotional, she just shut down and stopped. That I think she very much is I can't even express it.
Yeah, and I think she has to keep like moving forward, keep pushing forward, and doesn't want to stop and like focus on her. She very much.
But I also think that's like hashtag mom life is that you can't stop to think about the emotional stuff a lot of the time, because it's like, I need to do this and I need to do this and I need to be like this for my kid.
But one thing, so you just mentioned the title again, and I don't think we mentioned in the questionnaire of does the title fit the movie?
I was waiting for that question to come up, so we totally skipped that.
Yeah, because I had some.
Oh, I have total thoughts on that. God, we're so dumb.
Titles, yes, we totally unfortunately skipped that one. So one, does the title fit the movie?
I think it does.
It does, for sure.
I love it. I think it's great. I wouldn't change it. You said you had alternates. I love it.
I have a couple, but I still feel like Once was the best, especially because we talked about these recent movies of like Chicago, Hairspray, Rent, like just like really.
It's
like
I will say it's
word.
really punchy to have
Oklahoma,
that one.
like all these movies of just like one word.
Yeah, but I just love it. I love Once as the title. The more I watched it, I was like, yep.
It makes sense. It's like this fleeting moment of time where they were like together, but like he's going back to London. She's like moving on with her husband. It's like this.
And the fact that they don't end up together. I love that. I love it. I mean, obviously everybody wants everybody in any kind of romantical situation to end up together. But I think because they don't end up together, it was just this once in a lifetime passing of ships. Amazing. I love it.
And it makes it more satisfying for like every other love story when you know that they don't always end up together.
Loved it.
Love it. Alternate titles that I had was For the Love of Music, because they definitely were bonding over the music. It didn't seem as strong. And then like something like Offbeat or Out of Sync, because it seemed like they were like just not quite in sync musically, and like it didn't seem like their lifetime like matched up just right. Otherwise, they could have been.
I think if Out of Sync sounded as had the same flow as In Sync, that would have been a great title, because they were in different places, but they did meet up just right at one time, and then they had to continue to be in their own places.
Yeah. But otherwise, like,
how did we not talk about the title of this movie? I
was looking forward to the whole time, thinking like,
me too.
The whole time, be like, oh, what other titles could I come up with? And yeah,
and just watching it, I was like, this is the title for the movie. 100%. This is. I feel like I feel the most satisfied by the title of this movie than I have for one in a very, very long time. Very long. I can't even think of one where I feel more satisfied than this one. Like,
despite the fact they didn't even say the title, as far as we know, in the movie.
And hey, that's okay. You love the title of the movie thing more than I do.
We talked about how they kind of romanticize like immigrant culture and just like how different it is there versus how it's kind of portrayed a lot of times, like in America at least. So I thought that the bank loan guy, I thought that scene was really funny, them like playing music, but I also thought that whole job of like being a bank loan person, I don't know if it's like that anymore today. It feels like fewer people are doing that, like going to a bank. It's more like online applying for just straight up money versus anything. It feels like a worse version of Shark Tank, because I imagine you get so many people that are like have such stupid business ideas. They come into a bank and they're like, yeah, dude, look at this. I got this great business idea.
It's poor man's Shark Tank.
And it's got to be so awful to be like, your business idea is so stupid. But if you
but also to have that weight on your shoulders anyways, of like, yes, I believe in you, I'm going to give you money. Like that feels like a big job. Yeah.
And it's more like, are you going to pay me back if it screws up? But also think about people that like feel dumb, be like, oh, I was a bank guy and I totally passed on like funding like Microsoft when they were like a small, like fledgling, stupid idea in my mind, but ended up being huge. But I just thought it like seemed like it'd be really fun if it wasn't like, like betting all of my small bank's money on this person.
If you're into gambling, I think being a bank loan person is the job for you.
If you don't care if your like bank goes under and be like, yeah, this guy seems like a good idea. I'm gonna go ahead and it's only like $1,500 this guy needed, like, or $2,000 the guy needed. Yeah. It's not a huge deal, but still, I just thought it seemed like a really crappy.
Several $2,000 people a day, a week, a month, a year.
Yeah. How many times do you get people coming in asking for stupid business loans? Next note being, how the fuck do you operate that guy's switchboard? We're in the recording studio and he's got 10,000 dials on that. And he's like, he's listening on, he's like, yeah. And he reaches for like one very specific one and dials it. I'm like, we got like 5 on this one, on this Rodecaster Pro. And I'm like, how do you know which of those millions to possibly dial up or down?
And at the end of their recording session, guy's like, oh, thank you for everything. And he's like, oh, I just pressed the buttons. And I'm like, you pressed a lot of buttons. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And you knew which buttons to press. And not only did you just press buttons, you pressed the right buttons.
And you turned dials. That's a lot more than just pressing a button. That's more than just 1 or 0.
And slid some things
sliders,
like
sliders. Sounds right.
I feel really proud of myself that I can operate this very.
And we're only using 2.5 of these dials.
I pressed the record button. The fact that I can get the sound effects to go at the right time. I always forget to turn the volume up on them. Like, I am not one of those people that I just look at that giant. I mean, it's a big board with. I mean, I would love to know how many buttons is truly on like the standard sound mixer board.
And also,
it's got to
like,
be 1,000.
how much of that could now be replaced by what we have, like 18 years later, 16 years later, of like all the dials and everything? It's mostly controlled by like software, and then you got a couple dials to like kind of dial things in and up. Absolutely crazy. And the last note I had was that this felt like Bohemian Rhapsody, but a little bit more rushed because there wasn't as much background.
Timeline.
Yeah, condensed timeline because there wasn't as much background and like a whole career's worth of songs. This was just kind of like an album with a
It wasn't
backstory.
Queen. It was just this guy on the street in Ireland.
Yeah, just a Hoover fixer sucker guy. But yeah, that was Once, and I
will not see it just once.
Yeah.
I've now seen it twice.
I really liked the movie. I still very much like can't unsee the age difference and just the creepiness there. But otherwise, love the whole story and the music and all that.
Yes. It was weird for me. I don't think it bothers me quite as much as you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love it, but I was not there. It's not my story to tell. But this movie, man, I liked it way more than I thought I was going to. Mm-hmm. And even the Rotten Tomatoes and the score on the TV were pretty high, 7.4, I think. And
I mean, it's hard to find like real fault with it besides obviously
97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That, very like good story, had a great flow, especially for the first half. And then the second half, it wasn't as fast paced, but it still had good, like, continuity through the whole thing.
And I feel like this also makes a case for, yes, they don't end up together in the end, but I still feel so satisfied by the movie that like that it feels like this is just how life is kind of thing. And we don't get that a lot with movies and TV. And I think we should have that more because I think
we're seeing a lot more of that, of like realistic relationships in movies.
Yes. And in books. I mean, I listened to a lot of books, and I find that things feel more realistic and less like, oh, that's exactly what I wanted him to say in this situation. Or like it feels a little bit more authentic, which I really love.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was Once. It was great. If you are enjoying the podcast, you can rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching us on YouTube, thank you for spending that time watching us talk to each other. And you can subscribe on our YouTube channel and give
thumbs up.
Give this video a like. Leave a comment about what you're liking, what you want to see more of. If you want to see some behind the scenes stuff, watch our funny reels because we're so silly. You can follow us on Instagram at Culture Night Pod. Also on YouTube, we share the reels as shorts on YouTube. And tune in next week to see what our, I believe, season finale of season 3 will be. And catch you next week.
Yep.
So one last cheers. See you next time.